Jesus, or as we call him in Hebrew, Yeshua, is no longer the best kept secret among Jewish people in Israel. For the first time in history, since the book of Acts, our team is reaching millions of Israelis with the good news of Messiah Yeshua.
유대 민족이 뛰어나기 때문에 독립한 게 아니라 하나님께서 독립을 시키시려고 작정하시고 일을 진행하신 거다. 그런데 하나님의 역사를 가능케 했던 근거는 뭔가? 유대 민족은 어디를 가나 가정과 회당은 버린 적이 없어요. 회당은 교회예요. 이 두 개의 기둥을 하나님께서는 활용하셨다. 이게 바로 공동체예요.
히브리적 사고를 가지고 읽어야 된다 이 말이죠. 그러면 14대는 무엇을 이야기할까? 이스라엘 말로 다비드라는 말이에요. 다비드. 그런데 이게 이스라엘 숫자로는 4예요. 이게 6이에요. 이거 4예요. 자, 다윗이라는 이름 합치니까 뭐예요? 14예요. 예수님의 족보에서 보시면은 다윗을 기점으로 해가지고 잘라나가면서 14대 14대 이것을 기준으로 이야기하고 있는데요. 이게 바로 어디에서 온 거냐? 다비드라는 사람 이름에서 그 근거를 찾아서 이야기를 하고 있다는 것이죠. 하늘과 땅 위에 주 이스라엘에
그 옛날 홍해가 갈라지고 여리고 성이 무너지는 것보다 더 큰 기적이 지금 이스라엘에서 일어나고 있습니다. 2000년 동안 그렇게 예수라면 부들부들 떨던 그 유대인들이 마음의 문을 열고 예수를 믿기 시작하는 일들이 늘어나고 있다는 얘기죠. 어떤 사람은 자살하려고 권총을 머리에 갖다 대고 있는데 예수님이 나타나서, 어떤 사람은 술에 취해서 길에 쓰러져 있는데 저쪽에서 대형 트럭이 달려오는데 예수님이 나타나서 이 사람을 구해줬답니다. 어떤 사람은 통곡의 벽에서 머리를 앞뒤로 흔들면서 계속 기도를 했습니다. 하나님, 왜 우리에게 메시아를 보내주지 않는 겁니까? 예수는 아닙니다. 예수는 우리가 버린 쓰레기에 불과합니다. 그 쓰레기 말고 진짜 메시아를 보내주십시오라고 계속 기도하고 있는데 그 옆에서 예수님이 통곡의 벽에 손을 짚고는 이 남자를 보면서 눈물을 흘리고 있더라는 거죠. 지금 그 땅 이스라엘은 이렇게 놀랍게 복음이 퍼져나가고 있고 이스라엘은 회복이 되고 있다는 거죠.
Is the beginning of a spiritual prophetic revival is now taking place in Israel. There are many good ways to bless Israel, but we believe that the best way to bless Israel is with Yeshua. Today is the day to become one for Israel.
구체적으로 이제 이스라엘 성지 순회나 이스라엘 회복에 대해서 더 성경적으로 알았다니 너무 감사하고요. 이번에 그 세미나 기간을 통해 가지고 또 제가 새로운 면으로 좀 많이 알게 된 것 같아요. 특히 이스라엘의 그 지나온 역사라던가 처한 상황이라든지 또 앞으로 복음화시키고 하나님 앞으로 인도하려면 우리가 어떻게 해야 될까 진짜 기도 제목을 많이 안고 들어가고
이곳에 와서 다시 생생하게 모든 강사님들의 그런 강의를 들을 때마다 다시 제 마음에 뜨거움이 올라오면서 진정으로 이스라엘에 대한 파수꾼의 역할이 무엇인가를 깨닫게 됐고요.
아카데미를 통해서 하나님의 마음, 이 땅의 그 쏟는 마음을 저희들이 알았고 12명의 강사님들을 통해서 풍성한 하나님의 그 말씀과 마음을 저희들이 받았습니다.
preached in all the world, and then shall the end come.
Israel is entering one of the most important times since her rebirth on May the 14th of 1945. 50 days from now, Israelis will go to the polls to elect a new government. The outcome of this election will most likely result in the prophesied peace agreement that will mark the final 7 years to Armageddon. Well, ladies and gentlemen, my excitement meter is going up. Prophecy is being fulfilled on every side, and we need to stay up with it so that we can understand what God is really doing, because God is involved in all of our world affairs. He's involved in all of our business. Now, we've got to talk about what's happening. Israel is up against an August 1st deadline, which is a little over 2 days from today. What's the August 1st deadline? That's when all the parties have to have their list that will actually be on the ballot set. Well, what happens is they can make their list and they can negotiate it so that it will produce the best result. For example, there will probably end up being about 14 parties on the ballot. But those 14 parties learned last time that they can get left behind, and everybody that votes from them will waste their vote if they do not make the threshold of 3.25% of the total vote. If they don't make that, then they're out of the Knesset. They have no power. Everybody that voted for them wasted their vote. Well, the smaller parties learned last time that this needed to be avoided. So what they're doing right now is they're merging together with other parties to form bigger parties. So anyway, that's exactly what's happening, and that's something that all of us need to realize that is happening. So the next 2 days are going to be very interesting. As a matter of fact, some things just happened today that I'm going to be telling you about. So we want to get there as rapidly as we possibly can, because I want you to hear all about it. First of all, I want to take you to the Jerusalem Post. There's a right-wing party, actually two right-wing parties, formed an alliance that will be led by Ayelet Shaked. This comes from the Jerusalem Post just today. The new right, which last time ran with Naphtali Bennett and Ayelet Shaked, has signed an agreement for a joint run with Beit Yehudi and the National Union. Now, this ends weeks of speculation and days of negotiations. So they're going to put all this together, and they'd love to have as high as 16 seats in the Knesset. If they had that, they would become the third largest party, which means they would wield a lot of power. Now, the name of the new party, just formed today, will likely be the United Right, although this has not been finalized. The deal requires that all parties remain together in the coalition during the negotiations period after the elections. Now, let's pause just a moment to make sure you understand. So when the elections are held, then the results come in. The elections will be held September the 17th. And so we'll know that this big new party, the United Right Party, or whatever it ends up being called, is going to control 12, 14, 16 seats in the Israeli Knesset. Well, we're sure that the Likud party is going to be one of the biggest parties, and we're also sure that the Blue and White party are going to be one of the biggest parties. So now they've got to decide, how can we put together a coalition to form a majority in the Knesset? A majority is 61 seats. So if the Likud gets 25 and the Blue and White gets 25, nobody has a majority. Well, we're going to talk some more about this, because this is coming down right now. As soon as you say end time, they say, whoa, the end of the world. When's it going to be? And you can see this mask of fear. I'm not telling you the end time is coming. I'm telling you, you live in it right now. Daniel chapter number 7, verse number 4. The first beast was like a lion. We have the eagle used continually to depict the United States of America. You see it on governmental documents. We are the generation for which these that you will not miss one segment of understanding end time, because I've had many people tell me it's changed their life forever. Many of the major prophecies of the Bible are given to us 2, 3, some of them as high as 4 or 5 times. There is not any chance it's not going to happen, because it's in your Bible, it's prophesied, and the prophecies always coming back. Now, I want to get back to this election, and we need to spend a little time, because we as Americans, we pretty much have a two-party system, Republicans and Democrats. Not so in Israel. They have many parties. Consequently, when the election is over, it's not over. Because the last election they held, which was back in April 9th of this year, they had their election, and then they started trying to put a coalition together, and they were never able to succeed. So those elections became null and void, and now they're having new elections here, September the 17th. Now, it's only happened this way one time, just happened. They don't want it to happen again. They want a conclusive result on September the 17th. So here's what happens. Once the election takes place, you may have one party with 30 votes, 30 seats in the Knesset. You have another party that won 25 seats in the Knesset. But normally that's a right-wing party as opposed to a left-wing party. So that means that the right-wing party, who has the most votes, is appointed by the president of Israel to go out and put together a coalition. So they may go get a coalition that has 12 votes, and another one that has 10, and another one that has 5, and they all have to add up to at least 60 plus 1. Now, they would prefer to have 68, 70, 75, but a lot of times they can't get that many. There has been a government in Israel that governed for quite a time with only 61 votes, which means they have a very slim majority of 1. And if one Knesset member defects, the whole government comes crashing down. Now, I know it sounds a little complex, but you're getting ready to watch it happen, and so I want you to understand. So the vote's going to be held September the 17th, and then they move into their coalition negotiations, and hopefully they'll have a government sometime in September, but sometimes it goes as far as 2 months. So it could be as late as November before the new government is sworn in. Now, the reason this is so important is because President Trump is over here waiting patiently in the wings, because he wants to put his political plan for peace in the Middle East on the table. When will he do it? He wants to wait until there's a legitimate government in place in Israel. So there's a lot of things up in the air right now. Now, back to our article. It tells us, the article is stating that this coalition of right-wing parties has just been put together. They've been working on it for weeks and weeks. Well, it just happened this morning. It was finalized. And so these are right-wing parties. They don't agree on everything. However, they agree on enough that they say, look, let's compromise. Because if we don't get together, some of us may be left out. And the last time that happened, and it cost the government. Netanyahu could not put together a government. He got to 60 votes. He couldn't get 61. And the New Right Party, led by Naftali Bennett and Ayelet Shaked, they were left out. They would have had 3 or 4 seats, and they could have put the government over the top. But they were left out because they were just barely short of the 3.25 percentage of all the votes that they needed to win any seats in the Knesset. So all of a sudden, 3 or 4 seats disappeared. The government could not be put together. And they finally had to have new elections, which of course is very exhausting, but also very expensive. Well, now all 3 of these right-wing parties have come together. All 3 of these parties embrace never dividing Israel. They embrace not giving away land for peace. And they have traditionally been the partners of Benjamin Netanyahu, even though he is not as strong in that position as they are. But they have absolute veto power. As long as they are in the government, they will not allow a deal of trading land for peace. At least that's the way they claim. Okay, so all 3 of these parties also recommend that they will recommend to the president that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will be the one assigned in this new election to formulate the next government. Now, this was a crucial demand of Beit Yehudi leader Rabbi Rafi Peretz. He said, we've got to re-elect Netanyahu. He's the only viable candidate. And this proved to be a significant sticking point in the negotiations with New Right leader Ayelet Shaked and co-founder Naftali Bennett, reluctant to accede to the demand. Why were they reluctant? Well, number one, let's just say Netanyahu doesn't win the largest block of votes. Or let's say that they endorse him for the prime ministership, but he doesn't have enough right-wing seats in the Knesset to put a government together. They wanted the liberty, after Netanyahu couldn't make it, to shift candidates to someone else. I do not know who they favored. Both Naftali Bennett and Ayelet Shaked, they harbor ambitions to someday be prime minister themselves. Furthermore, Netanyahu has been working against Shaked and Bennett because he fears them. Shaked, it was rumored, would become a part of the Likud party. But Netanyahu said no. Now, it was rumored that it was Netanyahu's wife who vetoed Shaked in the Likud party. Because if she had become part of the Likud party and had made a very strong showing in the election, then it could put her in a position some way to be the successor to Benjamin Netanyahu. And the rumors have been rife about who's going to someday replace Benjamin Netanyahu. He just became the longest serving prime minister ever, 10 years. He has now served longer than Israel's founding prime minister, David Ben-Gurion. Well, he has ambitions to keep going for a while. And so all of this is politics and power playing behind the scenes. Well, because that he sort of blocked Shaked and Naftali Bennett, well, there's probably some feelings in reverse against him, even though sometimes you have to make a league with your enemies when it comes to politics. Okay, so Shaked declared, following the signing of the deal, that it was a wonderful piece of news for the right-leaning bloc, adding that weeks of effort have now borne fruit and that the deal was reached to prevent precious votes on the right wing being wasted. I've talked to you about that. If you don't get 3.25 percentage, all those votes don't go for anyone because you didn't make enough votes to get in the Knesset. Now, Shaked has been chosen to lead this new unified party, this United Right Party, because all the polls are saying that with her in the leadership, they will win as high as 16 seats in the Knesset, but with Peretz in the leadership, they might get 9 votes or 9 seats in the Knesset. So finally, these polls gave her enough leverage to insist on being the leader. So now here's the other caveat to all this. Shaked is not religious. She's secular. Most of the people in this new union, most of them are religious. And some of them rebelled at having a secular person who's not religious, who doesn't apparently keep kosher, probably doesn't religiously keep the Sabbath, but to have her become the leader was repugnant to them, but they want to win, and they don't want a national union between the Likud party and the blue and white party, who would then turn and negotiate a peace deal, probably embrace the Trump peace plan, and they don't know what's in it yet for sure, but the rumor is out that it actually calls for a two-state solution, creating a Palestinian state. So all of this is a big power play to try to make sure they can get a right-wing government and maintain veto against a Palestinian state. So here's what Shaked said after the victory. We all need to be in one big party, she said, vowing to do everything to unite with even more parties until the last minute. Now, the Likud states that the right is in danger following this unity agreement that was just achieved today. This comes from Israel National News today. Sources in the Likud, that's Netanyahu's party, oppose the agreement between the new right and the united right to run together in the upcoming elections in September. It's a fictional union if it does not include all the parties on the right. If this is the end of the process, while the Arab parties are uniting completely, then the right-wing bloc is in danger of losing the government, the Likud stated. And you can be sure that that's coming from Netanyahu himself, because he is the head of the Likud party. Bennett, Shaked, and Smotrich have left 5 to 6 seats out of the right-wing bloc. They are consciously risking the continuation of the right-wing government. In other words, they've endangered things. They're claiming, the Likud party is claiming, as a result of what they just did, they're going to lose ground rather than gaining ground. It is not too late to correct this dangerous mistake. Shaked says, we also want to unite with Zehut, Atzma, Yehudit. Those are 2 more parties. And that's what the Likud is referring to. These other 2 parties on their own will probably not make the threshold to be involved. And so all of their votes could be wasted. So consequently, here's what's happening. New right leader Ayelet Shaked said that she was just getting started after finalizing a deal under which she would lead a joint list with the United Right faction in the upcoming elections. I am very happy that after many efforts, all my friends, Rabbi Rafi Peretz, Bezalel Smotrich, Naftali Bennett, succeeded in building together one large faction of religious Zionism and the secular ideological right, Shaked said in an interview with Arutz Sheva. Shaked said that she would like to see the small right-wing parties, Zehut and Atzma Yehudit, agree to participate in the joint list. So now she's addressing what the Likud is fearing. She's saying, I'm going to quickly turn to them. In the coming days, the party list will be closed. That happens by August the 1st. So we've only got a couple of days to get all this done. I would like both Zehut and Atzma Yehudit to join the larger faction and build one big party like the Republican Party. Now then, what does Netanyahu think of that? Let's say they get one big party and they end up with 15 to 20 seats in the Knesset. Well, some of those seats are going to be pulled away from the Likud because there are some conservatives in the Likud that fear that Netanyahu is going to go form a unity government with the blue and white, which would probably result in a peace deal with the Palestinians, and that means yielding land for peace, giving up part of the promised land that God told them, you're not supposed to ever give this land away. I'm talking about the land of Judea, Samaria, known in our news as the West Bank. Okay, so this is the next article. Ayelet Shaked speaks with Itamar ben Gvir about running together. This comes from Israel National News today. Chairwoman Ayelet Shaked of the new United Right Bloc spoke on Monday with Itamar ben Gvir of the Otzma Yehudit party about the inclusion of Otzma Yehudit in the new bloc, according to Israeli television. United Right is offering the 8th place on the candidate list, but Ben Gvir wants places 5 and 9. Now, what's that mean? Well, when you have a list and your people are listed in this list, if you win up to 9 seats, then that means that they would get number 5 and number 9. Whereas Shaked is saying, well, you don't have enough votes on your side to demand that high of a placement. Therefore, she's offering, I think it said place number 5. Okay, so this is all, isn't Israeli politics exciting? You talk about Republicans and Democrats. Once you throw 14 parties into the mix, well, sometimes we don't know whether we're pitching or catching. All right. Another article, the Likud rules out unity government. Now, that's one of the things that everybody's worried about, that Netanyahu is going to go off and form a unity government with the blue and white party, put it together, and leave the conservatives out in the cold, which means he would be free to negotiate a deal to trade land for a peace. Well, now the Likud party comes out on the 26th of this month and says, we're not going to form a unity government. But I'm going to pause right there before we finish this segment of our program and let you know I don't trust this at all. Now, Netanyahu is probably putting out this word because he does not want the conservative faction of his Likud party going to vote for the United Right, because if that would happen, then he's going to lose more and more strength. So he wants all the votes possible to come to the Likud party. So he's put out this word that the Likud party is ruling out a unity government with the blue and white party, but you can't trust that. This was done in an internal party memo, and this internal party memo said instructing party officials not to speak out in favor of unity government. Recently, some Likud officials, including M.K. Barkat, who is the mayor of Jerusalem, he publicly endorsed the formation of a unity government after the September 17th election. So, as I mentioned, Netanyahu is issuing this statement that he's not going to be a part of a unity government, but don't take that to the bank, because I think the possibility of a unity government is very high, because it looks like to me that only with the unity government could there be a peace deal, and President Trump is waiting in the wings with his peace deal. Now, this is a time not to be ignorant. If you... Three of the main right-wing parties have just now merged together to make sure that they all pass the 3.25 threshold of the total votes. That way they can capture seats in the Israeli Knesset. Now, the Knesset is where the power is. The Knesset is like our Congress. They don't have two houses of Congress. They don't have a House and a Senate. They have one house, a total of 120 seats. Furthermore, they do not directly elect their prime minister. They elect the Knesset, and then the Knesset votes for the prime minister. So in order for a prime minister to be elected, he must have 61 members of the Knesset vote for him to become the prime minister. I know it's a little different than the way we do things. It's the parliamentary form of government. Many of the Europeans embrace this form of government as well. Okay, so we're talking about where we are today. These three parties have come together. There are two more small right-wing parties that Ayelet Shaked, who is now the leader of these three parties, being referred to as the United Right, she is now out trying to get these other two smaller parties to become a part so that they can really have a large bloc. And she's saying, I'd like to have a right-wing bloc, sort of like the Republican Party in America. Well, if they did that, they would have a good shot at becoming one of the strongest parties, if not the strongest party, up here to the next few elections. So all the politicians are watching all these maneuverings. Now, Netanyahu said it is important for the Likud to be large, instructing party officials what talking points to focus on during public appearances. We've seen what happens when the Likud isn't large enough. A vote for the Likud is a vote for a right-wing government led by Netanyahu. Now, this is what they're saying. The only question is, can we believe it? Will it really be a right-wing government, or is Trump back here in the wings with his peace plan that he's ready to propose, which calls for a two-state solution? So I can see, I'm sure you can see that the plot thickens here. The memo went on to say that the Likud will not be a partner in a unity government. Now, they say that until they decide to be a partner in the unity government. You know how that goes. I voted against it before I voted for it. We've seen all those kinds of political maneuverings here in the United States of America. The communique went on to say it is important to prevent right-wing votes from being wasted, so as to ensure that we do not weaken the right-wing bloc and potentially force yet another round of elections. Now, Israel is in no mood for another round of elections. They've already let everybody know we're not doing that. So if Netanyahu cannot put together a coalition, then somebody else may get a chance. Maybe the Blue and White Party, or maybe another member of the Likud Party. There are several popular members that might be able to pull it off. So it's so complex. Plus, Prime Minister Netanyahu is possibly going to be indicted for crimes come October. Now, he claims he's totally innocent, and he may well be. I don't know the answer to that. But the Attorney General has already made the decision that he will question him with the possibility of indicting him in October. So elections are in September, and he's facing all these things. And yet most of Israel think he's the best qualified to be the prime minister. And you thought American politics was complex. Well, in a recent poll, 2/3 of Israeli Jews support a unity government. 2/3. But they support it without the Haredi parties. Now, the Haredi parties are the parties that caused the stalemate in the last elections, because the Haredi members, they do not serve in the Israeli Defense Forces. They also favor the public transportation not traveling on Saturday, on the Sabbath. They also favor the rabbis, that they will control all marriage and many other facets of Jewish life. They do not want a theocracy in Israel. Now, some of the right wing, they would like to return to the days of King David and King Saul and King Solomon. They actually would. They think that that's what they're supposed to do. But many people, these 2/3 that are voting for a unity government, they're against that. Okay. Now, this article was written just right after the first election back on April the 9th. That's when this poll was taken, saying, well, let me just read it to you. Over 2/3 of Israeli Jews want the ongoing coalition talks to end with a unity government that excludes the ultra-Orthodox parties and advances religious pluralism. In other words, not everybody's got to just walk on the same track, but it allows for different religious views. Remember, this article was written just 1 week after the elections back in April the 9th of this year. According to a public opinion poll published Tuesday, 66% of the Jewish public prefers a government that includes the two largest parties, the Likud Party and Blue and White Party, which both won 35 seats in April 9's elections. And that leaves out the ultra-Orthodox Shas and the United Torah Judaism parties, a poll conducted by the Hadush Organization for Religious Pluralism found. As opposed to 34% of Jewish Israelis who support a more narrow coalition, including ultra-Orthodox parties and maintaining the status quo on issues of religion and state. Now, I'm just trying to give you a feel for what's coming down over the next 50 days. I'm telling you, the next 50 days will be some of the most important days in the history of the modern state of Israel since May 14th of 1948. Now, the numbers favoring a unity government were highest among blue and white voters, an overwhelming 98%. 98% of the blue and white voters say, yes, we'd like to have a unity government between the Likud and the blue and white. 84% of Israel Beitenu voters also expressed support for a government devoid of ultra-Orthodox parties, indicative of Chairman Avigdor Lieberman's ardent support for secular policies such as civil marriage and public transportation on Shabbat or on Sabbath. Some 55% of the Likud voters also support such a unity government. So Netanyahu's own party supports a unity government, 55% according to the poll. Top Trump diplomat shares plans for future peace accords between Israelis and Palestinians. So while all this is going on in Israel, guess what Donald Trump and his peace team is doing? Well, they're out there sharing their plans for Israel's future and for the future of the Palestinians. Mr. Jason Greenblatt spent 20 years as the top real estate lawyer for New York developer Donald Trump. He worked on numerous deals from his office in the gleaming Trump Tower on Manhattan's Fifth Avenue. But on a summer day this week, Greenblatt was in another gleaming skyscraper several blocks away from his old office, this time at the United Nations, working on a geopolitical deal that has proven elusive even to the most seasoned diplomats. He addressed the United Nations Security Council on reaching a comprehensive peace deal between Israel and the Palestinians. Now, remember, this is the deal that if it is signed, it will mark the beginning of the final 7 years to the Battle of Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus Christ. So don't act like this doesn't affect you. It affects you. It affects me. It affects the entire United States. It affects the entire world. So he's been working on this deal and speaking at the United Nations, which is the only seat for world government on the planet. And he had some blunt words for an institution that for decades has failed to resolve the conflict. We know that the Palestinians have seen promises made by some and not kept. But President Trump and his administration desire to make the lives of everyone involved better, Greenblatt said. Peace will require honesty and a willingness to consider new ideas, as well as courage and hard compromises. This is a time for us to speak to each other candidly, not in stale slogans and talking points. Greenblatt is the president's point man on peace in the Middle East. And in his address, Greenblatt called out the well-worn bromides of the international diplomats who have yielded little progress. We will only achieve peace by putting forth a plan that both sides, hopefully, will be interested enough and excited enough to engage on and negotiate on and reach the finish line, he told Fox News in an interview after his Security Council appearance. We won't achieve peace by constantly referring to tired talking points to international law that isn't clear on the subject, to international consensus which doesn't exist, on this particular subject. We want tremendous lives for the Palestinians. Remember, the Palestinians are listening. We want lives that mirror the lives of Israelis, as long as we can keep everybody secure. He's saying to the Palestinians, your standard of living is 1/3 of that of the Israelis. We want you to have it as good as the Israelis. Then he said, but we're not going to get there with slogans. His UN visit came 1 month after the Trump administration sponsored a Peace to Prosperity workshop that was held in Bahrain. More than 300 officials, including those from Israel and Arab nations, mingled to chart out an unprecedented effort to bolster the Palestinian economy. The administration plan is to provide $50 billion for desperately needed economic development that officials say would create 1 million jobs for the Palestinians and take the West Bank and Gaza into a new era, as well as neighboring economies. So can you see it? Everything is converging. The vote is taking place in Israel. Netanyahu, he knows all these things I'm telling you and more. He's one of the most seasoned politicians in the world. He knows how to play both ends against the middle. He knows which buttons to push. And yet, his seat at the head of the Israeli government is in danger. Will he survive? I think he will. But I don't know whether he will survive as the head of a national unity government so that he and Trump can put together this peace plan. I do not know the answer to that. Here's what I do know. I know from the scriptures there's going to be a peace deal, whoever the prime minister turns out to be. There is going to be a peace deal. I don't even know for sure it's Trump's peace deal, even though that's the only game in town. But there's going to be the deal, and it is going to result in the triggering of the final 7 years to Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus. Will this decision be made at the polls 50 days from right now? The coalitions are being put together in the next 2 days that may determine this very thing. You and I are living in amazing, heart-throbbing times.